Welcome back to the CNBC TV 18 live coverage here as we continue to discuss the fine print of Budget 2017 on the Mint CNBC TV 18 budget verdict. Joining us now here with us is the Minister for Coal Power, Mr. Piyush Goyal. Sir, thank you very, very much for joining us here for the budget verdict. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for Mr. Goyal. Sir, let me start by asking you about what we should now expect as far as the road ahead is concerned. The budget is over and done with. I think the biggest positive that people have taken away from the budget is that the government has stuck to the path of fiscal consolidation. There has been no profligacy in an obvious sense. What should we now realistically expect in terms of the reform agenda for the road ahead?
A lot of things have been said about the reform agenda, particularly when it comes to having more clarity in the way foreign investments will be treated, particularly when it comes to the tax roadmap for taxation in the country, and in terms of the government's long-term priorities to have a strong fiscal situation, taking care of the macroeconomy on the one hand, while at the same time encouraging investments, encouraging people to spend more with more money in their pockets, helping the farmers towards doubling their income, get easier availability of cheap credit, get availability of all other mechanisms, whether it's soil card, whether it's irrigation facility, whether it's their ability to insure their output, various steps to encourage and empower the farmers on the one hand, various steps to encourage entrepreneurship on the other hand, and amongst all of that, the overarching aim by 2022, to have shelter on everybody's head, to have electricity, toilets, good quality education and healthcare universally across the country. All of these put together is what will drive demand, and demand will obviously drive investment.
Sir, since you spoke about agriculture, we got people tweeting and sending us questions, and this question comes in on Twitter saying, what exactly is the roadmap to double the income for farmers? Any concrete action plan, Mr. Goyal?
Each one of these is a part of a larger roadmap or a larger action plan. Now, an action plan can have two ways about it. One is let inflation continue at very high levels. Let the people suffer across the country. Because of inflation, you will increase only the MSP. And possibly at the end of 5 years, you may have double the value proposition. He may have double the sale value. But his income is not going to get doubled because his investment and his costs of production are also going to correspondingly go up. Our effort is to, on the one hand, keep inflation down. And you have seen us successfully maintain inflation, the consumer price inflation below 4%. Wholesale prices are at about 2.5%. But at the same time, provide low-cost finance to him so he can plan for more value-added products, help him with water in his farm. So every Manrega project today is geotagged and is used to create water ponds, which will help farmers get drought-proofing of their agricultural production. A very robust insurance system, which will ensure 100% payment to the farmers in the event of any loss of production or productivity. So it's a roadmap which is going to be gradually paced out and empower them to double his income, not depend only on doles.
You know, switching to the exact opposite side from agriculture, sir, this is another question that's coming on Twitter. Surprised at the rationale of 10% surcharge for salaries with 50 lakhs and above. Is demonetization not meant to extend the tax base? If that was the rationale, then why this additional surcharge, Mr. Goyal?
Well, I think not too many people are in any case in the bracket of 50 lakh to 1 crore. Above 1 crore people were already paying this surcharge. Possibly I may be falling in that bracket also. But the idea is that this section of society can contribute, particularly when we are giving a lot of benefits to rural India, to rural development, to the agriculture sector, to the middle class. We thought that there should be a small contribution.
But this section of society is anyway contributing. It's the section that's not contributing that should start contributing, surely.
Which is of course our effort. You will see the amount of informal sector which is now getting into the formal economy and the amount of support the government is giving them. Companies with turnover of up to 50 crores getting 5% less tax. Small traders, presumptive income being taken at only 6%. if they join the formal economy. No post-mortem of the past transaction for traders or business persons.
Okay.
No questions asked about the past if they now go legitimate. So I think our effort is to move them into the formal economy. It's a small burden, but just like the Give It Up campaign, possibly at some stage, this section of society, and only a few lakh people, can also take this in the spirit of contributing to a better India for the poorer and deprived sections.
Everyone in this room is smiling, Mr. Goyal. They don't really have a choice but to smile, sir. They can't really say very much at this point in time.
No, it has a very risky statement that you have just made.
Which is what?
Which means that the CNBC TV 18 reflects in its audience only the voice of the 50 lakh to 1 crore income earners, a few lakh people.
At least the ones that are sitting in this room.
Very dangerous for you from your viewership and advertising perspective.
At least the ones that are sitting in this room, sir. But I'll finish off very quickly because the Twitter questions are coming in thick and fast, Mr. Goyal, and this one has to do more specifically with your ministry, sir. So let me put that question to you. Mr. Goyal, why is the PLF of thermal plants still so low? That's the question that's come in on Twitter, and then I'll get more questions.
Very good question, and it gives me an opportunity to show off a little bit because I've answered this on more than one occasion. Very clearly, this nation had a lot of projects which were stressed, stalled, stranded, and were not able to be completed for either lack of environmental approvals, some land problem, promoter problems, banking problems, finance problems. And this was a phenomenon across the power sector. After this government came in, we realized that no new investment will come in the sector unless these old investments which are clogging the system in a way are resolved. And I'm delighted to share with you that in the first 2 years itself, we were able to get 45,000 megawatts of power plants back into operation, which were all otherwise just stalled at different levels. Now, on a requirement where the country today at an average day takes up about 136 gigawatt, 136,000 megawatt of capacity is consumed in any normal working day, which Mr. Razdan will obviously tell you. Otherwise, of course, my Vidyut Prabha app can give you exact status.
How many apps do you have on your phone, by the way? There's the LED app, there's a Vidyut Prabha app.
And there's a Narendra Modi app which gives you a bigger picture of what the government is all about.
But of course, you have to have the Narendra Modi app.
But I don't have to have it. I like to have it because it gives me what's happening across the country. Quick updates and real-time information. And maybe many of your viewers may like to join the Narendra Modi app.
And he has Paytm as well, that I know.
And I have SBI Buddy as well. But having said that, so when on a base where consumption is at about 136 gigawatt, you add 45 gigawatt within 2 years. So in a way, your denominator has increased so significantly in terms of the available capacity that obviously demand can't grow by 30% or 35% in 1 year or 2 years. So obviously that PLF supposedly falls, but if you were to reflect that from the old plants and the new plants separately, you'll find that the PLF of all the operating old plants has gone up significantly. Many of these new projects were set up without even a PPA in hand. And therefore they are facing stresses, but I'm happy that at least they've got commission. Now the nation knows that they can get even 50% more power if the demand increases at a drop of a hat, literally. So the nation today is power surplus, it's coal surplus, and I promise you these 50 lakh to 1 crore income people would live in a country and would like to work and invest in a country where there's surplus power rather than a company perennially facing shortages of power.
You're absolutely right, sir, but if I could pick up on the point that you made about investment, do you now get a sense, sir, that private investment is on the cusp or on the verge of picking up? There has been demand contraction, which got exacerbated post-demonetization. It's not just a phenomena of demonetization. We have a problem of broken balance sheets within the private sector. That is a problem that is yet to be addressed fully. The NPA problem is what holds banks back, perhaps, from lending. So do you get a sense today that we're in a better position to try and see a pickup as far as private investment is concerned, and whether the budget in any form or fashion has turned the needle on that?
Well, if you look at the situation in the country in 2014 and you look at the situation today, you'll realize the big change that has happened. In 2014, our job was to repair a broken economy. And while repairing that broken economy, we also took the opportunity to create a sustainable framework for long-term sustainable development of the economy. At that stage, we had two paths before us. We could have easily just asked the banks to do in Hindi they say lipatopi, or just a cover-up operation, and keep restructuring loans, keep allowing the situation to deteriorate, and have a business as usual scenario. But in the long run, the bubble had to burst someday. We decided to take the bull by the horns. We asked the banks to clean up their balance sheets, take the hit wherever projects were beyond repair, accept liability wherever there was bad lending, support cases where there was a possibility of revival and resurrection. And I'm happy to note that all the banks have really benefited from this cleaning up operations. It may look like a stress today, but that stress is better taken today than taken 3 years later when further interest has piled up and the balance sheets get even more stressed.
Okay.
I wish the same thing was done 5 years ago, post the 2008-9 temporary succor that was given by taking up fiscal deficit from 2.5% to nearly 6% in the course of 1 year alone. And now the same people are trying to give us advice on how to run the economy better. The people who have actually created the mess in the first place. And the nation suffered nearly 6 years post that, trying to set things right. I think it's been a difficult period for industry for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Clearly there was overcapacity which was unplanned, without need. Several, like the power sector, the shortage was X, but possibly capacities of 5X were created in that period. So there was no real proper assessment, which we are trying to do. We are also trying to strengthen the banks to get the mess out of their system. You saw the chief economic advisor throwing the concept of a pura, and it's not a bad idea. I think we must
But is it a
Para, what is that? Para.
Public Asset Rehabilitation Agency? So, you know, this idea was floated by the Niti Aayog. We had the Niti Aayog Vice Chairman as well as CEO here with us. This has been something that the Niti Aayog has proposed, the Chief Economic Advisor has proposed. It has been on discussion with the government. When do we finally see a decision being taken for or against? Because there are arguments on both sides, whether we need one and whether this is the most effective way of addressing the NPA situation.
Well, I think our mind is open. And we have a lot of experts in this room who could possibly even guide us going forward. But the idea behind the Chief Economic Advisor opening it up for dialogue and debate is that more wiser voices are heard, we get more feedback, and then whatever is the right way. This government is very open to ideas, very sensitive to what would be a better way rather than imposing what we think is best.
Okay.
And I think once this public debate comes up with the most robust solution to this problem.
Is there a timeline, sir?
ASAP.
ASAP. So a discussion on para ASAP.
Should be held ASAP. I hope you would lead some engagement and some dialogue on that.
It has happened, sir. It's happened during the course of the last few days here on CNBC TV 18. Another Twitter question, Mr. Goyal, that's come in from you, for you. What is the procedure to work with you and contribute to the society with the help of the Power Ministry, Mr. Goyal? That's the question that's coming for you. Is there an app to work with Piyush Goyal as well?
No, there is a possibility you could connect with mygov.in, and we have a system there where they assess what role each one can play who offers their services. But more importantly, one can just send in a mail to me. My email ID is available on the internet. It's absolutely open for anybody, or get onto my website. But then you must realize that serving the government has a lot of problems. Your salaries are going to be low, if at all you are paid. A lot of sacrifices involved, and in this government of Prime Minister Modi, no possibility of corruption. So a person who's wanting to work with government has to come in with his eyes open and ensuring that he has a family taken care of and doesn't depend on government salaries.
Well, I wonder if he's going to send in his CV now to you, but that's the question he asked me to ask you here on Twitter. But Mr. Goyal, you know, seriously now on one of the other issues, and you and I have had this conversation in the past, and I think as we were progressing during this evening's discussion, the number one idea that everyone believes ought to move forward with much more urgency is this business of strategic disinvestment privatization. You said the chief economic advisor's job is to throw up ideas. He's thrown up that idea of privatization within the civil aviation sector, the banking sector, and the fertilizer sector in the economic survey. A list of strategic disinvestment candidates has been drawn up. But you yourself have been dealing with getting the government to get rid of its residual stake in Hindustan Zinc, sir, and that's been going on for several years now. In this context, how realistic is it for us to expect privatization, strategic disinvestment?
Well, as far as Balco and Hindustan Zinc are concerned, it's in the courts. And being sub judice, we have to wait for the final verdict of the court. Should the verdict allow us to disinvest, we as a government are ready to disinvest the residual stake. In any case, we don't have a majority holding, so it doesn't make sense to hold on to that small stake. But as far as other strategic disinvestments are concerned, we have a bottom cap or a collar on 51% holding of the government,
banks, yeah.
And we can't go down below that. So we will have to engage with other views and other schools of thought and get more consensus, because that will need a wider participation and agreement with different sections of society before we can look at taking that down below 51%, but we are open to the idea.
Okay, since we're talking about ideas, and you know, one of the big ideas of the previous, or the first budget, in fact, was the National Investment in Infrastructure Funds. I think there was a lot of hope and a lot of expectation on how the NIIF would function, but so far, it's been struggling to get off the ground. What, to your mind, could be the issues there, and how do we address those?
I believe that would have been better answered when you had the earlier participants, because I'm not fully aware of what is happening with the NIIF. But I did hear that there was some talk when the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi was here, and maybe we will see some quick action on that score. The CEO has now been appointed, and one of the earlier ideas was to have a sub-fund within that for renewable energy also. So I do hope now with the CEO in place and possible cooperation from other sovereign funds, we'll see some fast action on that.
Okay. Mr. Akhil Gupta here has a question for you, sir.
Sir, I'm talking to you as in my capacity as the chairman of TIPA, that's the Tower and Infrastructure Provider Industry. We provide towers to the telecom industry. And we were under the impression that we are setting up a tower industry, but it happens that we are perhaps also setting up a power industry. Because on predominantly a very large percentage of our towers, we have to depend on diesel generator. Now, over the last few years, it's been dramatic improvement, but in cities. But we cover about 95–96% of the geography of this country. And that means going to the deepest part of this country, every nook and corner, every village. Unfortunately, when I look at the all India averages, we are still in single digit in terms of EB supply per day out of 24 hours, or perhaps inching just towards a double digit. And I think time and again it has been shown that we are now power surplus. But the problem is that in villages in particular, we do not have the last mile connectivity. And I think that in terms of the basic infrastructure, telecom, as you know, is an important part. You have been a big supporter of telecom. If we have to really move forward towards a digital India, which means simply taking internet to every citizen, we would need that power, sir. So if you could please guide us as to when do we get it.
Very well taken, Mr. Gupta. Very clearly, the power is not a problem. We have sufficient power and as much and more. Problem is certainly the last mile, which is a state subject, and I'm not able from here to directly distribute to all these 300 or 400,000 towers. Otherwise, I would love to, because I want to sell more power. Literally, I remember about 2 years back, in one of my review meetings, I told the Coal India marketing director that I visualize 1 year later, you'll be going with a bowl trying to market coal rather than sitting in your air-conditioned office and people coming to get coal allocated. That was the word in those good old, bad old days. And the same thing has happened with power. Once coal was sufficient, we got sufficient power in place. I also tried to see if Power Grid could become a distribution licensee and take a connection, but then those high tension lines don't have the technical ability to be able to serve these towers. I would have to actually lay new lines, and then it would be in contrast with the state government's own priorities and get me into a mess. You know what's happening to my company in West Bengal. They've set up a power substation. It's all ready, completely set up and about, should have been commissioned in January. But then the ghosts have come home to roost now, and history is repeating itself on its head to the current government there. And in the process, it portends very dangerous signals if you're not able to take power to every nook and corner of the country. But that's an unfortunate single incident in West Bengal. Largely across the country, states are now more and more getting committed to ensuring power for all 24/7. In fact, we've drawn up an agenda with different states. Only one state in the country has not signed power for all 24/7. Not very difficult to guess, though I can't take the name in today's context. But other than that, everybody else has come on board. I've actually asked my team also to study if we can do any special arrangement with the state discoms, because you are a good paying customer, and I think your tariffs must also be amongst the highest commercial tariffs. So I'm going to talk to the states. What I'll do is I'll talk to the states and see if we can get them to have a incentive come penalty structure and give you 24/7 power, because in any case you're using diesel, which is much more expensive. So let me try and work that with the states.
Bad for the environment as well, sir. So you'll get a lot of support if you actually manage to get this
We'll work with the states together on that. Why don't you also think of some ideas, and let's work together. We could even look at distributed energy. But then again, that'll mean further investments in solar and batteries and all.
Excellent.
But let's come up with ideas jointly on that.
Sure, quick one.
So very quickly on that one, I think our towers can actually become the distribution points. You know, because our towers can cover, we can provide distribution to the village. So we'll come and talk about that.
Look forward. Lovely.
So that conversation will continue offline. I'll come to you, Vaidya, in just a second. Mr. Razdan, go ahead, sir.
Sir, I think continuing in the same vein, you set a very aggressive target of 175 gigawatts for new renewables, essentially solar and wind. Now, this intermittent power requires a very strong component of balancing power and storage and smart grids. So in this budget, what are we looking at for the hydro sector, you see? The gestation period of the kind of projects we have now on our shelf is about 10 years. And there are some hydro projects which I had initiated as a joint secretary. They're still not operational. The other thing is that for the hydro sector was looking forward to renewable energy status in this budget, and I do not think it has happened. The other is storage, sir. If you do not have balancing power, you should have storage. Now, I have to find an allocation for developing indigenous storage manufacturing capacity in the country, that's batteries. And the last is smart grids and distribution. We cannot have so much renewable power in the system without smart grids and distribution, and these projects are going to come up within 6 months to 1 year, whereas the gestation period for all the other things that I've talked about may be anywhere between 2 to 10 years.
Thank you very much.
List, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Razdan. I am almost wondering whether you still have somebody in my office checking out what my program is, because this afternoon at exactly 4 o'clock, I had my lunch, and soon after that I sat on the hydro with both the power secretary and the renewable energy secretary. And we had a detailed discussion as regards moving it to renewable. It doesn't need the budget or decision at the budget level. I'll be taking it up to cabinet. We are still studying all the comparable examples from different parts of the world. There is some concern about the methane or some part of the gases that come out of hydropower, which has been flagged off by some NGOs and environmentalists. I normally like to get everybody on board before I take such a major decision, but I myself am convinced that looking at whatever I've seen, most parts of the world have recognized it as renewable, and once I get my final report, I'll be taking it to the cabinet. As regards the storage systems, the battery storage is still quite expensive. For a country like India, it's not going to work out. Maybe telecom could afford it, but a common citizen or at the village level, it's not going to work out. And if we have to give 24/7 power, we are still dependent on coal as a base load, and solar and wind and hydro is supplementing that. Having said that, as I increase 275 gigawatts of solar, wind, and other forms of renewable energy, I do understand the balancing of the grid is going to be a critical factor. We are working on trying to get the hydro sector revitalized. We are seeing how to make hydro costs down to under 5 rupees. Today, the challenge is that because of all the land acquisition problems and the problems of local R&R and the expectations at the local level, particularly these are in the hill states,
right,
which are more difficult to work in, and the associated infrastructure, the roads you build, the tunnels, the connectivity of transmission, these projects have become quite expensive and power goes to about 6, 7, 8 rupees. I'm working out how we can bring it to sub 5 rupees. Little bit of financial engineering and a little bit of working through the system by supporting and encouraging it by budgetary support. Budgetary support really is my last option because as on principle, I believe I should try and make the power sector self-sustaining, not dependent on government doles. My own experience about LEDs, about solar, has been that as I removed government support, the industry flourished and did very well.
Yeah.
But hydro, I'm trying to use more of financial engineering, a little bit of government support also. I believe that it's very important for this sector to flourish because it can add to that balancing load. I'm also looking at pump storage, whether that could be a viable option given that we have a lot of surplus power in the night. If we could generate some reservoirs and have ability to generate power for the peak load requirement to balance with wind and solar.
Well, you said that maybe Mr. Razdan still has inroads into your office. So I guess when they say you leave the government, but the government never leaves you, that's a clear indication of that. This gentleman, sir, has a question on addressing some of the woes that the tourism sector faces, the budget prioritizing tourism, planning to launch Incredible India 2. And I know that you've often told me that you're all talking to each other minute to minute, and it doesn't matter which minister you speak to, you'll make sure that the message gets to the right minister. So go ahead, sir, your recommendations for the tourism sector.
The Prime Minister has always talked about creating jobs and poverty eradication, and this budget has focused on rural, which is very good. But somehow, tourism industry, which is the largest employment generator in the world, because it's labor intensive, has been overtaxed. The service tax, which was 1.5%, has increased to 7%, which is about 500% increase. This was a notification just before this budget. Now what is happening is that India is becoming uncompetitive. Our neighbors have 20 million, 30 million tourists, and we are stuck on a 6 million figure. Secondly, the Indian jobs, which the Indian tour operator, and most of them are under the 50 crore, the small operators, they create millions of jobs here at various levels, even in hill stations. These jobs are going to go abroad because if a foreign tour operator books a hotel or a package in India, or one of these foreign funded so-called portals, they book, then they don't have to pay that tax. So this is something which I think the government has overlooked. The intention of the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister and the government is very good, and they want to create jobs. And after demonetization, we were thinking that the government will support this sector because we can create jobs and we can eradicate poverty.
I'll just share a very interesting thing that has happened only a week or 10 days ago. We had the tourism, culture, and youth and sports ministries, all three, collectively get together for a 2.5-day conference in the Ran of Kutch, where all the state ministers engaged with this subject also got together, and they brainstormed about what can be done to give a kickstart or a boost to Indian tourism. They had some very good deliberations. Particularly, there's huge potential which is hidden, which has really not been exploited in India. So our government is very committed to encouraging tourism. We see the big potential. I mean, a country like Italy or France or even the Vatican City by itself having such huge tourist inflow, whereas India with so much to offer, not being able to capitalize on that. So I assure you that that's something very much primary on our agenda. As regards the taxes, the service taxes on the tour booker, the person who books the tour, well, if the payment is made abroad, then there's tax withheld on the payment in any case. So while the service tax may not be charged, I'm sure the taxation would be charged, or no? It's not been charged. So good, that's a good input, and I'll certainly share it with the finance minister.
Next time you have a meeting like this, please involve the industry, because the wearer of the shoe knows where it pinches.
All right.
Good idea.
Involve the sportsmen, involve the tour operators, and involve the industry.
Good idea.
Then I think you'll be able to have a much better decision.
Good point, sir.
Good point. Well taken.
This question actually relates to finance ministry, but in your capacity as an insider in the government, I'm asking you. Now, a number of industries over decades have managed to convince the government that their industry is very important for the future of the country and for India and the global and so on, and are probably paying taxes of maybe 18% or 20% depending on what exemptions they get. Now, for companies less than 50 crores, of course, the issue is addressed. Now, let's talk about the rest. Now, all the companies who are paying, and a number of them, paying 33% tax or 34% tax loaded for cess, surely can argue that they're also very important. The finance industry or auto industry, or real estate industry, they're all paying 33% tax. Now, obviously, somebody who's had access to the system over decades has managed to get across certain tax structures, let me just say, justified otherwise, and it just sticks this way. So is there any time that we will get rid of these subsidies and bring them back? Now, surely this was one of the comments made by the finance minister earlier. But do you have a sense about when these subsidies roll off and when we can move to the structure like this? And is it politically feasible to do that because it will be seen as pro-rich?
Well, I think the Honorable Finance Minister was very categorical when he explained his logic of giving this tax concession to 96% of the companies, by the way. And I thought, Vedi, you should be very happy because you are financing most of those smaller entrepreneurs. But on what the finance minister said, I'll just reiterate so that you get the right perspective. When we did an assessment, we as in the government, the finance ministry did an assessment and found that the 96% companies with turnover of up to 50 crores, their effective rate of tax was about 30-odd%. And the larger companies, because they have larger appetite on investments and they've been getting exemptions for several years on different score, their effective rate of tax was already 25.6 or some percentage like that. Now, therefore, we wanted to bring the smaller persons at par and not keep them at a disadvantage just because they are small. In fact, worldwide, they get a benefit, and that is the benefit we wanted to give them. As regards the larger companies, the phasing out of exemptions cannot be done overnight. We have already assured the world and the people at large that we'll not do any retrospective amendments. So, therefore, these will prospectively fall out as the sunset clause sets in. It's about 7 to 8 years is what the Honorable Finance Minister said that these exemptions phase out. We'll keep monitoring the taxes paid by these larger companies. If at any point we see them going up beyond 25%, that will be the right time to reduce the effective rate of tax for them also.
Okay, so I think we're pretty much here at the end of the CNBC TV 18 budget verdict, but I will give a question to Mr. Rajiv Luthra before we close.
Thank you. Congratulations, Minister. You've been doing a great job, and we're hearing lots of good things about what you've done. After a long time, I've heard a minister, especially a power minister, say, let me show off about plant load factor. Congratulations. I want to make a few quick suggestions. See, while this 1.75 gigawatts, et cetera, is all the big picture, if you look at the small picture, for example, rooftop solars, all our government buildings to have solar. I put a set of solar panels on my house 2 years ago. It took me 8 months to get net metering sorted out. And the number of visits to the old days, whatever what it's called now, of my people had to go. And so these things, if they can be simplified, IREDA has a lot of good programs. The tax, you get a good depreciation as well. If we can put a little package of that together and put that even with housing societies or even MCD, for example, water harvesting is now compulsory. You don't get a you don't get a completion certificate. Similarly, something like this, if we can do at a smaller level, it'll change the whole peak load very quickly.
Well, I certainly think that somebody in this room has somebody in my office today. Because today I've addressed a letter to all the chief ministers who have not yet notified the new energy efficient building codes. And I wrote to many chief ministers, including the Delhi chief minister, much as I don't write too many letters to him.
What do you exchange SMSs, is it? Or tweets? Or tweets?
I wrote to all the chief ministers who have not yet notified that they should have new energy efficient building codes come into play, because that's the way forward for smart grids and smarter way of running the energy system. I grant you that net metering, many of the states are hesitant to allow easily because they look at it as a kind of loss to them. A consumer like Mr. Rajiv Luthra is obviously paying very, very large bills. And your rate of electricity must be quite high. You're cross-subsidizing the others who deserve to get cheaper power, given their economic status. So I think possibly that's the reason Delhi has gone a little slow, but I'll certainly take it up with the state government and their distribution companies and try and get the net metering process streamlined and made much more efficient. I also very much like your idea of these small informative pamphlets or booklets. In fact, I saw some of that in London. The association came out with that. It's not the government or the DISCOM.
Yeah.
Their local association came out with really easy to understand, colorful, and like a children's playbook, which explained how rooftop solar can work. And I'll take you up on that. I'll work on that and get some ideas and then maybe bounce it off you and see how we can.
The reason why this audience is in sync with the policy says because they watch CNBC TV 18, it keeps them ahead of the curve. Let me end then by asking for the final question of this evening.
Good evening. First of all, I'd like to congratulate on a very balanced budget this time, and first time we are surplus on power. Congratulations on that. I have one basic question. I am from the auto industry. So what is that we can expect in terms of supporting the alternate fuel technology, especially we are talking about the environment issues, so much of pollution and things like that. So is the government really focusing, and is there any roadmap for this alternate fuel technology, especially on hybrids and EVs and things like that?
This morning I was reading Pawan Goenka from Mahindra's.
Yes.
Wrote in one of the pink papers that he was very delighted that this government has increased the allocation of funds to the hybrid, to the electric vehicle sector, FAME, towards the FAME program. Faster adoption of manufacturing of electric vehicles. But that's a small part of it. That's only what we've done right now. We believe as a government that the country needs to leapfrog technology, move faster into the electric space. And while many other countries will have to replace most of their existing people own cars and they'll have to replace that with newer technologies, we in India have the unique advantage that large parts of our population has yet to own their own vehicle. And we should really move to try and get the first-time car owners or vehicle owners, two-wheelers, three-wheelers, to go straight for an electric vehicle. I personally believe this sector does not need government support and subsidies. It needs an enabling framework. It needs simple laws. And at best, it needs volumes. Once the volumes come in, it can stand on its own feet. The bigger challenge is going to be battery storage costs coming down. So we have a team working on that, an interministerial team. I've also requested a very senior professor from IIT Chennai who understands this subject and has been involved with this subject for many years to advise our government on what we should do better. It's headed by, this department comes under the Ministry of Heavy Industry, and they're working very proactively. All of us, the Petroleum Minister, the Road Transport Minister, the Environment Minister, I, in my capacity as Power and Renewable Energy, are supporting the Heavy Industry Ministry. If you have some good ideas how we can give a thrust to this, I have a vested interest that my power will sell. But more importantly, it's good for the environment, it's good for the nation. We believe that we need to rapidly set up fast chargers across the country, bring in guidelines or specifications of what the charger and the battery specs will be, so that there's uniformity in the country.
Right.
Not like was done in the past, that core banking solutions, each bank sets up its own.
Sure.
And now we are struggling that each bank cannot talk to each other.
Sure.
Similarly, we don't want to make those kind of mistakes that was done by earlier governments. We want to try and bring in a national framework which is uniform and can give a boost to this industry quickly.
So then let me end, sir, by asking you, I've been asking everybody to give us a headline for 2017. What is Piyush Goyal's headline going to be for 2017?
I didn't think of that before coming here.
So I know you think on your feet, so you're going to have to give us a powerful one.
Oh, really? Well, I think a good one would be that India is open for business. The ball is in your court. Are you willing to take the first mover advantage? Let's go for it. India is probably the world's largest market today, aspiring for a better quality of life. You can't get a better opportunity to get into meeting the aspirations of the people of India. My view is, you all have to take a call. Industry, business, investors have to take a call before somebody else does. Indian entrepreneurship has the ability, sometimes doesn't move fast enough. So I do hope Indian entrepreneurs move quickly to catch the opportunity that India offers today.
Well, yeah, Indian entrepreneurs ready. The applause in this room will give us a sense of how ready you are. That taking you up on your challenge, sir. Mr. Goyal, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you very much for joining us on the CNBC TV 18 Mint Budget Verdict 2017. A big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for joining us here this evening.